incompetent for their assistance. Suddenly, Jacob had an epiphany. He suggested incorporating a large, exotic animal into the event. He proposed acquiring a rare, snow-colored feline predator. Richard paused, considering the suggestion. He agreed that an animal could indeed create a memorable spectacle. However, he pointed out the logistical impossibility of obtaining a rare, exotic predator in their specific geographical location. He guided them toward a more practical solution, suggesting they needed a large animal that could be found on a local agricultural property, one that walked on 4 legs and consumed vegetation. Corey, completely missing the description, suggested an arachnid. Richard angrily corrected him, pointing out the anatomical incorrectness of the guess. Finally, Richard arrived at the solution himself. A horse. He declared that a horse would be beautiful and majestic. Corey marveled at Richard's creativity, wondering how he managed to conceive such a brilliant idea. Richard, feigning modest genius, claimed the thought had simply materialized in his mind organically. Jacob then provided the final piece of the puzzle. He suggested that the horse should serve as a monumental gift for Susan, an addition that would elevate the announcement to unprecedented heights. Corey, building on the momentum, proposed that the horse should be presented specifically as an engagement gift. This, they agreed, would make the announcement the most significant event in the history of their community. Richard realized the brilliance of the plan. He admitted that he was not currently engaged to Susan, but if he publicly declared his intention to marry her, everyone would accept it as truth. The concept of an engagement horse felt perfectly grand and romantic. Corey, taking the idea a step too far, suggested attaching a fake appendage to the animal's head to create a mythical, single-horned creature. Richard immediately dismissed the mythical creature concept as entirely foolish, but he fully embraced the core idea. An engagement horse was exactly what he needed. It was perfect. It would change the trajectory of his entire life. While Richard plotted his romantic gesture, James and Randy were holding a private council in a quiet corner of the park. Randy, still shaken by the encounter with Officer Ted, reminded James of a pressing danger. He warned that when they fully returned to their normal routines, Julian would likely seek violent retribution for the financial losses he had suffered due to their previous actions. James, holding the envelope of illicit cash, believed he held the solution to all their problems. He suggested offering the money directly to Julian, hoping that a substantial financial offering would erase their past transgressions and secure a peaceful coexistence. Randy hesitated, questioning the wisdom of the plan. James gently reminded Randy of the harsh reality of their situation. He pointed out that their wives were deeply traumatized by the events that had transpired, events that were ultimately set in motion by Julian's criminal enterprises. He emphasized that they were the ones who had endured the horrors of incarceration, while Julian and the others had escaped legal consequences. Randy acknowledged the validity of James's argument. He agreed that Julian bore a significant portion of the blame for their suffering. James then proposed a compromise. He suggested offering Julian only half of the money. He calculated that $25,000 would be sufficient to placate Julian, while leaving them with enough capital to live comfortably for an extended period. Randy agreed that achieving peace was the most desirable outcome. They made a solemn vow to never reveal the true origin of the funds to anyone, understanding that the secret was the only thing keeping them safe from Officer Ted's wrath. They decided to stop at a local fast food establishment to celebrate their freedom and finalize their strategy. Meanwhile, Richard, Corey, and Jacob had somehow managed to acquire a horse. They stood in a dusty paddock, admiring the majestic creature. Richard commented on the beautiful coloring of the animal's coat. However, their admiration quickly turned to frustration as the horse refused to move. Richard, lacking any knowledge of equestrian handling, ordered Corey to pull from the front while Jacob pushed from behind. Corey, recalling a piece of practical advice, expressed hesitation, noting that standing directly behind a large, powerful animal was generally considered unsafe. Richard dismissed his concerns, demanding immediate action and absolute silence. The situation rapidly deteriorated. Jacob pushed against the animal, attempting to force it forward. The horse, feeling threatened, reacted defensively. It delivered a powerful, swift kick directly to Jacob's chest. Jacob collapsed to the ground, crying out in severe pain, clutching his ribs and his neck. Richard, displaying a shocking lack of empathy, apologized hastily but prioritized the mission over Jacob's well-being. He told Jacob that he would have to find his own way back, as they needed to depart immediately with the animal. Jacob, writhing in agony, expressed deep concern that he had suffered a serious internal injury. Richard instructed Corey to assist Jacob, while he took charge of maneuvering the horse. As he struggled with the animal, Richard once again lamented his decision to involve his companions, blaming them entirely for the disastrous turn of events, completely ignoring his own role in creating the dangerous situation. Corey, trying to comfort Jacob, compared the incident to a traumatic event from their past involving a sugary fruit beverage, noting that this current situation was significantly more painful and severe. Jacob pleaded for medical attention, stating his belief that he needed to visit a hospital. Richard dismissively diagnosed Jacob's injuries as minor bruising, stating that even if his ribs were broken, medical professionals could offer no treatment. He callously advised Jacob to endure the pain and avoid the hospital. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, Bubbles was busy completing his deliveries. He drove a small, modified vehicle equipped with a speaker system, likening his operation to a neighborhood ice cream vendor, but catering to an adult clientele seeking his crafted beverages. He was proud of his expanding customer base, noting that a famously short-tempered resident named Donnie had become his most frequent patron. Bubbles acknowledged that his beverage possessed a strong, robust flavor profile, but he dismissed any complaints, particularly from Donnie. As he approached Donnie's residence, the tranquility was shattered by Donnie's explosive anger. Donnie emerged from his dwelling, screaming furiously. He was enraged because Richard's vehicle had recently scattered gravel across his property, ruining his landscaping. Bubbles, acting as a peacekeeper, attempted to calm the irate man. He offered Donnie a complimentary case of his beverage as a gesture of goodwill to compensate for the damage. Donnie eagerly accepted the offer, his anger slightly subsiding, but he demanded that Bubbles deliver a message to Richard. Donnie insisted that Richard replace a portion of processed poultry that he alleged Richard had stolen the previous week. Bubbles assured Donnie he would pass along the message and inquired if Donnie planned to attend Richard's upcoming celebration. Donnie, still volatile, shouted that he had not yet made a decision. Bubbles drove away, shaking his head at the encounter. He marveled at the sheer exhaustion that must accompany living in a state of constant, intense anger. He feared that Donnie's uncontrollable temper would eventually cause a severe medical emergency. Later that afternoon, James and Randy finally returned to their residence in the park, carrying the weight of their secret wealth and the anxiety of their impending confrontation. They were exhausted and simply wanted a moment of respite to organize their thoughts. However, their peace was immediately broken by the arrival of Julian. Julian stormed toward them, his face dark with suppressed fury. He declared that the moment of reckoning had finally arrived, a moment he had been anticipating for a very long time. James and Randy pleaded for calm, expressing their desire for a civilized conversation. Julian rejected their pleas, his anger boiling over. He blamed the two men entirely for the disastrous events that had led to the loss of $400,000, an event that he claimed had completely ruined his life. James, attempting to take control of the narrative, stated that he and Randy were prepared to take full responsibility for their actions. He expressed deep remorse for the pain they had caused. Randy echoed the sentiment, adding that they had formulated a plan to make amends. Julian, unwilling to relinquish his dominance, aggressively silenced James. He asserted that he was the one dictating the terms of their punishment. He laid out a draconian sentence. He announced his intention to confiscate half